Good evening. Several months ago, I was walking out of an establishment and noticed a pregnant woman approaching the same place I was leaving. She was still in the parking lot and several yards away from the sidewalk, but not so far that it would have been just a little too creepy for me to have held the door open for her. Within the next few seconds, I had a rush of thoughts that culminated in me letting the door go as soon as I got through it and walking past her, our eyes briefly meeting before I continued with my day. My initial thoughts were about the rather obvious pregnancy. I wondered, who did she reproduce with? Is this child the product of miscegenation? Hypergamy? Who is the man she's with, and what is he like? Of course, my next thought was whether or not the child was even produced with whomever she was with, or was instead the result of an affair. I questioned whether or not they'd actually create a family and homed together, assuming the former was true, or if she'd divorce-ravish him at some point, an approximated third to half of first-time marriage's end. This was assuming she was even married, and not part of some New Age-style union or mating trend that rejects marriage and the family for all of the wrong reasons, creating new pitfalls and dilemmas. But my thoughts continued. Who was this woman? What were her politics? Genetics? Her demeanor and values or lack thereof? Many modern parents actively teach their children to be vicious towards political and cultural opponents. These same parents often proudly upload videos of the act online. That is, if they bother to parent at all. While a simple physiological check could be done, it answered very few critical questions for me. I knew nothing about her, or this child, or anything pertaining to her. And so, for what reason should I benefit her, even in this small way? The act was more likely to come back to haunt me than warmly embrace me. As I express these thoughts, I find myself overwhelmed with an impulsive drive to instead behave in ways I had propagandistically hammered into my psyche from a young age. But a single look at the modern world, my life thus far, and even an honest look at the century that inculcated me with these ideas I would later learn to be lies, helps me down a path men of conscience and empathy deliberately chose to travel down over a decade ago now. As anyone in this decade is now acutely and painfully aware of, we currently live in a deeply hostile and dangerous world. Assuming this hasn't always generally been true, and we've merely woken up to something that was always with us. People will take anything from you that you're willing to give them, and they'll manipulate and deceive the things you aren't willing to give them out of you, if not just outright take them by force. They'll then proceed to blame you for either not giving them enough or hurting them if what they took led to an adverse effect. In response to this actively vicious environment, I see many people advocating for retaliation, some sort of equally active and vicious retribution in order to see right done and evil vanquished. While I can certainly understand this mentality, as I, too, was once a young man who strongly believed in things, I find it inefficient and risky to indulge in this rather rash and primal answer to the problems we face. In addition to wanting to destroy you in the first instance, this world and species will also gleefully retaliate against retaliation in every preceding instance until you've been decimated. These and many similar observations appear to be the result of a now lethal dose of what once allowed for so much. We are currently going through a time of kindness acting as a poison, a once highly valued and rare substance that did wonders in trace amounts, now having created a world with nearly non-existent selection pressures, and a suffocation and drowning of those at the whims of this new environment. In particular, those who are most prone to offering this substance are most at risk, although those who merely consume the harvest will one day find themselves in a similar situation, the original arbiters having ceased to be. All the while, those who offer an immense and powerful salvation through their words and actions are converting for pre-existing and new beliefs. I have met many woke converts and priests that are indebted to this new conglomerative system. The internet is now packed to the brim with self-proclaimed saviors of all sorts, and those who shower them with adoration and wealth. There are also many, especially many males, converting to Islam, although occasionally other older faiths as well. These many converts sacrifice themselves on the altar of one belief system or another for the promise of what the modern world so utterly lacks: a woman, a family, a tribe, and something living to believe in and glorify. As I once read, this species will worship anything. Leave a golden statue out in the desert long enough, and people will eventually pilgrimage out to it and kneel down before it. What we see in the ruins of Christianity in the broader West is an absolute bastardization of what once was. Our ancestors were very passionate and fervent believers in not only salvation, but specifically the achieving of it through defying wickedness. Something nearly completely forgotten and only remembered in fragment form. It is still remembered, to come full circle, to enforce a man taking care of his child and the woman who gave birth to it, but not to enforce this woman being decent and submissive to him, or to even ensure paternity or the right to raise the child should it actually be his. In this way, these fragments act as a deeply destructive force, as they require the full system to be of any use civilizationally, and to those who suffer from the missing and broken down aspects of what once used to be. The only time it seems modern man believes in any form of evil at all is when it, ironically, prevents him from pursuing some primitive drive resulting in a few seconds of immediate pleasure, these impulses often being some of the greatest evils. For those, such as myself, on the lithophorous vestiges of what once used to be, I find quite a few things to be vital. A man must realize that reciprocity is key, that what we all deem to be equal is heavily biased and lopsided, and that he will often need to ensure others live up to this. He cannot simply hope for another to be honorable, or that any grand other will defend or provide for him. He must do so himself, on his own, and realize the likely hefty costs of actually expecting and mandating a return. Man must also realize he may be the one others struggle to find such mutualism with, and that he may be the assailant and not the victim. In addition, he must realize that the phrase, "killed them with kindness," is meant to be taken literally. Many utilize emotional terrorism and blackmail in order to ensure they are provided for, and that others, at least on this emotional and social level, are incapable of acting in ways they may deem detrimental to them. Many people, and especially women, narcissists, the unwell, and the egotistic, have particular needs that they demand be met, and they will do what they feel is necessary to take these things from those around them, including you. In this way, you can view many interactions you have as an armed robbery. It is best to be in a position where you cannot possibly be robbed, but it's not possible to avoid this fate forever, especially if one must live around others. To forfeit to others what they desire before the theft takes place has been a commonly successful strategy for millennia, although even this tactic fails to compete with the utter wealth of the world that has been created around us. To provide what one could call genuine empathy is also an arduous task. The default state of the human creature is to live through instincts and interact through emotions. The promise of immediate gratification and the satiation of one's desires will forever be the undying preference of even those who can see through it and catch glimmers of something greater. Those who came before us were likely to eventually see a return on their actions. In our global world, I've found myself to have inundated many I'd never speak to again once our common circumstances changed, and many others who've never stepped foot on the continent I lived on, neither of which groups necessarily held any common beliefs or felt any accountability regarding my altruism. Even what I may have once considered to be avarice in those days pales into insignificance when I watch many I am currently exposed to simply want to see the traits that permit such things in this world burn. We men find ourselves in quite the predicament. Each of us have had great misery bestowed upon us, even before being born, for the unforgivable acts of those who came before us. In a strange twist of fate, it would appear the only way to retain and preserve traits such as kindness, empathy, and selflessness, one must be very discerning of when, to whom, and to what magnitude they should be given and exposed, lest they be drained from this world until they simply go extinct, and often for no other purpose than hedonistic indulgence. The more advanced our technology becomes, and the more foreign it makes our environment, the more we seem to find a familiar ancient vibe to how one must conduct themselves to so much as survive, let alone well. The most démodé of tools and tactics permitting navigation of this new, unheard of realm, as we deduce the corrupt profligacy that's imbued within us. One passerby at a time.